Okay. Thank you everybody for coming today. This is our 1 p.m. Lighthouse event. You shouldn't have gotten here accidentally, but in the case that you did, welcome anyway. We're talking about mobility, specifically white cane versus use of a dog guide. And just before we start, I want to let you know that tomorrow we are going to have our 1 p.m. session. It's going to talk about coping skills, stress management, and laugh therapy. We have a wonderful client who has volunteered to train us all in what laugh therapy is. And then immediately after that 1 p.m. time slot is our support group. And that's going to be on the same number, same meeting number. So you can actually just stay on if you're someone who's coming to Friday's event. So thank you for coming today. I know I've said it before, but we love seeing everybody on here because it means that, you know, what we're doing means something to you. You're supporting us while we're supporting you. So I hope you are learning new things and gaining new information, especially about this blind rehab field. So Latricia and I are going to start. So start. Oh. I'll introduce. Why don't you introduce yourself, Latricia?
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Latricia Gambrell, and I am one of the orientation mobility specialists here at the Lighthouse.
And I'm Maddie Spencer. I'm an O&M, orientation and mobility specialist as well. We want to talk a little bit about what orientation and mobility is. I know that we've talked about it last week at the session, but for those who aren't there, if you haven't taken O&M, orientation and mobility is basically getting around safely.
Using a white cane.
Sometimes it's using a white cane. Sometimes it's as simple as getting to your mailbox. Other times it's as complex as learning to take the bus or getting to another county. Sometimes that, you know, we have clients who need to learn how to do all of these things. A lot of times the training is need-based and goal-oriented. So for example, if you live in Highlands County, you don't have a public bus, right? You have the Highlands County Transit out there, I know, but you don't have a public bus. So we probably won't do bus training, but you'll definitely need to learn how to take that Highlands County Transit. So that's something that we would talk about and get you signed up for. So it is very specific. Generally it's one-on-one training and yeah, personalized.
And I know last week we touched a little bit on why a person should use a white cane that has a vision loss. And mainly the 3 reasons that we always stress as instructors are for safety. So the cane is going to help you detect things that may be coming up directly in front of you, such as a curb, a step, or any object that may be in your direct path of travel. And then the other reason is also for identification. So the cane is white with the red at the tip, and those are the colors that represents a person that's blind or visually impaired all around the world. So that will be your identification piece to let other people that may not know you or may not be familiar with you, you know, by having the white cane, they would know that you have some type of vision loss.
Yeah, and if you were to take that cane anywhere in the world, most locations understand that identification process. So if you take it if you take it in the plane and you go to Europe, it means the same thing there as it does here. So
right. So identification is a big piece of using the cane. And also the last reason is to have protection under what we call the white cane law. And that is just a law here in the state of Florida. And most states have some version of the white cane law, but it just simply protects a person that's crossing streets that have their white cane in their hand. There's a law that actually says the car has to stop for that person and let them proceed to cross the street. So as we work with clients, we always say that, yes, there is a law that protects a person that's blind or visually impaired, but as it relates to training, you learn strategies and techniques that you can also use so that you're not totally depending on a car that's, driving 60, 50 miles an hour to come to a complete stop for you. So, having the white cane and using it those are three of the reasons that we always recommend to clients as it relates to the O&M training piece of having the white cane.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point out that the training can take anywhere from just a few weeks to, years, depending on what your goals might be.
Right. It varies from person to person. And that's one of the nice things about, having that one-on-one training with the O&M specialist is that you're able to work on those things that, that presents a challenge to you. And again, it varies from person to person, whatever those things may be, as it relates to how long training would last for each person. So basically, with the session today where we're talking about the white cane versus, a guide dog, we just want to kind of give you a little bit of background about, again, orientation mobility and what that training is and what it looks like in comparison to a person using a guide dog.
I think the first thing to point out is that we do give out different white canes at the Lighthouse. So we give out a support cane that is red and white, and then we give out something called an identification cane, which is also red and white, but very lightweight. But the cane that we're going to talk about specifically today is called a mobility cane. And it is red and white with the tip at the bottom, but it's just sturdier and it's meant to clear your pathway in front of you. So it's meant to bonk into things and tell you where items are, give you surface texture. I just want to clarify that before we start, because I know some people do have different white canes.
Right. Yes. So I'll just kind of go over some of the skills that we teach as it relates to learning to use the white cane, which can involve sensory awareness. And that's just simply where you're using, some of your other senses to figure out, maybe where you are as you're navigating on a route. So, sensory could be your hearing, smell, touch, and just awareness of basically where you are in space. Spatial concepts are some of the things that we cover also. Just realizing that something is there, there's an object there.
I think a good example of that might be if you're learning to cross at an intersection, a specific one by your house, and you're walking towards the intersection and you hit a garbage can. Well, knowing where that is compared to the intersection,
right,
is something that we talk about.
So spatial concepts, we do work a lot with the clients on, just trying to figure out as you're navigating through the environment. There's a technique that we teach called spatial updating, and that just simply means as you're moving through the environment, you want to keep track of where you are. So again, if you're walking a certain route, there may be certain things you're going to be looking for that your cane is going to actually contact. So, if you hit that trash can, then maybe that you're at your neighbor's house or vice versa. So just being kind of, aware of what's spatially in the environment that you're actually navigating through. And then also that relationships exist, between objects. A lot of times you can't see something, but maybe someone has described the layout of a room and that there are certain things in the room. And just because your cane may not contact those particular objects, you still need to kind of be aware that those things are actually in that room, or you may actually, run upon them at some point. Let's see, what else do we teach?
Just before you move on, I think a good example of that is furniture in a household, because I think if you are someone that lives in the same place you've lived in for a while and you're walking around your home you can usually locate things like your sofa or, you know, your coffee table. So those are kind of examples of that. Things that don't move, but if you were to enter the room, you would know that they are there and the general where they are.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And then also searching skills, techniques. We teach you, you know, how to search for certain objects that may, again, give you information on where you are, how close you are, identifying a specific place that you're trying to reach, or even locating an item. We teach independent movement, which means we want you to be able to navigate and get to wherever you need to get to independently. We also teach some protective techniques that a person can use, whether they are using a cane or just a couple of protective techniques that a person can use if they're not using their canes, which does help a lot of people, especially, for example, if you're getting up at night using your bathroom. There are a couple of protective techniques that you can use to keep you from bumping into the door frame or running into something if your cane, you know, is not available, because a lot of people just get up and kind of move around. So, you know, learning those protective techniques really helps keep you safe.
Those are really useful techniques for outdoor travel too, right? Because you can use them. A protective technique is useful if you are someone walking on sidewalks and you are going underneath, you know.
Low-hanging branch or something. And then, you know, and then lastly, the cane skills. There are different types of cane skills or techniques that you learn using the mobility cane. And it just depends on what type of terrain you're walking on, whether you're walking on, you know, grass or a nice smooth sidewalk, or you're navigating across sand on the beach. There are different techniques that you can learn to help you move through different types of terrains.
One thing to mention is, just like previously, we talked about how not everybody would learn the same things. Not everybody would learn all of these things. However, if you are someone with a goal of a dog guide, these are skills that you have to have, right?
Yes. Right. So again, when you're talking about the cane versus a guide dog, yes, if that's what the client is considering, there are definitely certain skills that you would have to learn and be able to demonstrate to even qualify for a guide dog.
Speaking specifically about those cane techniques, why don't we talk about how a cane works? Because I feel like there's a little bit of, you know, mystery surrounding it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, mainly like you said before, it's designed to be held out in front of you. Each person is measured, and your cane length is determined by your height, and it's designed to be held out in front of you, again, as you walk through the environment for detection of things that are going to be coming up in your direct path. So it just kind of clears your way as you're walking, which, again, keeps you safe because it's letting you know that, hey, something's coming up. Slow down, you know, check it out. And also, you know, hopefully that's going to also prevent people from falling, which is very critical, you know, depending on that person's age. That's definitely one of the things as instructors that we try to prevent clients from falling.
So if you can imagine, I'm not sure how many white cane users we have on here. So if you can imagine using a white cane out in front of you, you're sweeping it back and forth as you walk, and its primary goal is to hit things as you go, because that's your contact with the world around you. It's meant to tell you, oh, here's an object, or here's the edge of the sidewalk, so your feet don't find it and you fall.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead, Maddie.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, normally it's about, 4 feet out in front of you, you would say, Maddie? So basically with it being that length out in front of you, that's going to give you a chance to react to whatever is letting you know that's coming up, which is good. You need that reaction time. So a lot of people, when they first see the cane, they're like, oh, it's so long. But, you know, once we start training and they actually see how the white cane works, I mean, they really see like having, you know, those inches out in front of you really protects you. And again, it also depends on a person's gait, how fast they're walking. You know, if you have a very fast walker, their cane may need to be a little bit longer, you know, or if someone walks really slow, then maybe their cane can be a little bit shorter. So again, it just depends person to person. But, you know, having that length out in front of you is what is going to provide the protection that you need.
I do get that a lot. I think a lot of people are worried about having a cane that's very long. You know, I'll hand it to them and they'll say, oh my gosh, this is really tall. But it's important for your cane to be at about your, you know, armpit level, because the point is for it to clear 2 paces ahead of you, right? So as you walk, if you think about how long your pace, how long your, it's called a pace, right? The distance between you have 1 foot to the other. If you think about that distance, that's about how long your cane should be, so that it's clearing those 2 steps to give you that preview. So it's not too long. It's supposed to be that long.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of covered what a cane is and what's kind of involved in the training.
I think so. I think I would just also say that in order to learn how to use a cane, a mobility specialist works with you one-on-one, preferably like once a week, once every other week. But you have to do work on your end too. So you have to be practicing. You have to be getting yourself out of your comfort. And sometimes that's just taking your cane with you and letting other people know that you can't see well. So it's a lot of baby steps involved, but then suddenly you're doing all of these amazing skills and you're getting around, but it is a lot of work at the front on the client. It's not, you know, it's not us. They have to put the work in.
Right, a lot of practice. And normally as an instructor, we would give the client, you know, something to practice in between the times that we meet with them. And we can tell if you're practicing or not. We can also tell if you're using your cane, because the more and more you use it, you know, you're going to have wear and tear on your cane. So as a mobility instructor, we know if a person is using it or not.
Yep. When I get to a client's house and that cane tip is clean as the day it was given to them, then I know that they have not used it. You can't trick me. What we didn't mention is that with the training at the Lighthouse, you are given a mobility cane. It's just one cane. Sometimes it lasts somebody several years, but sometimes it does not. And you can buy them just online or from our Peepers store too. I'd highly suggest don't do it on your own the first time, because like Latricia said, you do have to get measured for it.
Yes. All right. I think that covers the white cane. So you want to move into talking a little bit about the guide dog?
Yeah. I like to, oh, I see a hand up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Patty. Hold on. I think that's Patty. I'm going to unmute you now.
What if you need your cane for walking because you have other issues other than your sight? You know, you need your cane to support. How do you do this with your sight problems?
So you're saying if you have a balance problem, are you saying, or?
Cane, a white cane, and use it so that you support yourself.
Right. So the cane that we are talking about today is the mobility cane, and that's the one, you know, of course, for detection. So basically, this cane does not provide any type of support. So you can't put any
Okay.
weight on it. So in a case like you're mentioning, if a client needed a cane more for support, Maddie mentioned there is also a support cane that's white that we sometimes give out to clients if they have a balance problem.
Okay.
And then sometimes we do have clients that are able to use 2 canes at one time. So they will use the mobility cane for detection, but they also need the support cane to kind of assist with their balance. So they may use 2 canes.
So how do I get a support cane?
That can also be provided through the Lighthouse as well.
Okay.
Mobility training. Yes.
Okay.
So basically that goes back to the assessment piece that Maddie mentioned, where each client has an assessment completed with the specialist. And then basically from the assessment, that type of thing is determined, like which cane is going to work the best for that client.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey, Patty, I made a note next to your name. So I'll just check into what your orientation and mobility status is, okay?
Okay.
Hi, Pam. You can unmute yourself if you'd like.
Okay, I'm sorry, mine wouldn't work at this end, sorry. Is that, I guess you'll get with it though, but I was just wondering if it's able to be done now to get a cane, or she would need to wait until we can get to see each other, or you can get to see her.
All of our assessments are being done over the phone right now, including O&M. So we are doing those right now. Yep.
And she could get a cane then sent to her or whatever, possibly after the assessment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You can mute me, I don't know.
Okay.
You've been muted.
All right, so that brings us down to talking about the guide dog.
Yeah, my first question with guide dogs, I call them dog guides, but either way, technically it's dog guides because guide dog is technically a brand within dog guides. But old habits are hard to break, Latricia, we know.
Okay.
But that kind of points something out, that there's a lot of schools for dog guides. We have one conveniently here in Florida, but there's many all over the US, including Texas, California, Montana, New York, New Jersey, Michigan. And there's a bunch, and they're accredited, certified dog guide schools. So the first thing when somebody tells me that they have a goal of a dog guide is I start talking to them about the different schools and ask them to research specific ones. Sometimes I know that this person maybe has more than just vision impairment going on, and there are some schools that are more specifically aimed towards those types of people. For example, if you have a hearing loss and a visual impairment, one school might not be as good a fit as another just because they have specific staff members and therapists on hand. So.
And, as a dog guide, it just depends on the person. That could be a choice, that they may be considering that as opposed to using a cane. So, as an instructor, we kind of walk them through the process, giving them the pros and cons of, using a mobility cane as opposed to using a dog guide. So we just want to kind of make sure all the information is available to them, to make that choice.
And we've kind of gone over a lot of the pros with using a white cane, but there's a lot of great things about using a dog. One of them, of course, is ease of movement, right? So remember, we talked about a white cane, how it uses surfaces around you and detects those items for you by bumping into them. Well, a dog doesn't do that, right? A dog maneuvers you around it, which is less jarring, right, when you're traveling. My only thought with that is that you don't have that contact with the world around you with like the garbage can. So you don't have that as a reference point, but you kind of learn different things with the dog guide, right?
Yes, as it relates, yeah, to the training. I mean, and a lot of clients kind of go back and forth, like, what's best for me? You know, should I stick with using the cane, or should I, you know, should I get a dog guide? And, you know, basically, as a specialist, you know, first and foremost, if anyone is even considering that, you still have to participate in orientation mobility training. You know, that's a requirement for most schools now, is that you have had to have had some basic orientation mobility training. So, I mean, that's kind of the starting place for anyone that's considering a dog guide. So, so I always just recommend the client, you know, go through the training, you know, because there are going to just be some things as it relates to the dog guide school that they're going to, that you're going to have to demonstrate to them. So go through the training, and then you can always, you know, kind of think about it on the end.
And that whole list of things that you were discussing are all skills that you have to accomplish before the dog guide school will come out and see you. So it's not, you know, it's not going to happen in a month. If your goal is to get a dog guide, it might be a year and a half. We have to be able to get people traveling as independently as possible.
Yes. Trying to think.
Gloria has a question. Gloria, go ahead.
What, who would you, how am I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but what would be a good, I don't know how I want to say it, but just like, what would be a good person to get a guide dog? How would you know you would need a guide dog that, you know, rather than a cane, you know what I'm saying?
I'm going to go over some of the qualifications for a guide dog, because each school kind of has specific qualifications that they're looking for in a person. And so a lot of times as the O&M specialist, we go over some of these qualifications with the client to make sure, can you do this, you know? So I'm going to kind of go over some of those really quick. So basically, your degree of visual impairment, you must be legally blind, and you must have completed orientation mobility training to demonstrate safe, independent travel. Okay, so that goes back to where we're talking about the white cane. You have to start there. That's your starting place, because some clients have, you know, applied for a guide dog, and then they say, well, have you had mobility training? And they say no. And then they stop the application process right there and say, okay, you have to connect with the O&M specialist to receive some training. So that's a must. Your need and desire, you must have, you know, the need for assistance with traveling. You know, you just can't say, oh, I want a dog guide, and, you know, you're not going to leave your house, or you're not able to move or walk a certain distance. Okay, so there has to be a desire and a need, because you know, they're working animals, and the schools want to make sure that they are going to be working. Okay.
I think the worst possible thing that could happen is if a dog guide gets home and they turn into a pet. You know what I mean? Like, if you're not actually going to use it, you don't actually have a need for it, this is not the right thing for you. If you think about how much a dog guide costs to go from puppy, you know, do all of the training, all of the testing, and then turn into a dog guide, it's an incredible amount of money.
Right.
So they're very particular about that. You have to have a need.
Yeah, and then your physical ability, you must be in good physical health. You know, being able to get out and walk the dog guide several blocks is definitely one of their requirements. You know, so if we're training a client and we see like they can barely go from their, you know, door to the mailbox, you know, that's a problem. And we have to be honest with them and say, you know, from the looks of this, we definitely don't think you would qualify, at this time, because you have to get out and be able to work it, several blocks. So your physical ability. And then your learning ability also, are you able to, because in training, it depends on the school, it can be from 6 weeks to, 3 weeks. It just depends on the school. You have to retain a lot of information. And as it relates, like with cane training, where you learn a lot of different techniques, a lot of different strategies, it's the same thing with the dog guide. You learn a lot of different techniques to work it. So you're working as a team. So you have to be able to retain a lot of information, and it's a lot of work. I mean, most of the time you start like early morning, 9, and maybe you work to 4, where you're training. You're in training all day. You're out in the community. You're on that particular campus. So it's a lot to learn. So you have to also have the capacity to retain a lot of information.
Latricia, I've actually had clients who got all the way out to California to the school, and then they decided that it wasn't a good fit because it was too much work.
It's a lot of information, and it's a lot of work. And then your financial abilities, you have to look at your finances also, are you able to care for the dog guide? That could mean buying food, taking it to the vet, if an emergency come up. So all those things, as a person, you would be responsible for. So again, when we're talking to clients, if they're barely, making it now, or they just have enough income to support what they have going on in their life right now, then hey, that may not be a good fit for you, because basically once you complete training, everything, is on you, unless you're in, a certain type of program. I know with veterans, for example, sometimes, the VA will help them with the cost of different things. So it just depends. But most people that I know that are guide dog users, that's the responsibility of that person. So, you have to look at your financial ability.
And it does vary school to school. Some schools actually require you to quote unquote buy the dog, because that makes it your responsibility completely. There are other schools that have a more supportive after school program, so that after you do graduate, there are more supportive structures in place, but some of them are very hands-off. The ones that you don't actually own the dog, like you don't buy the dog, they also come and check on the dog periodically.
Yes.
Because they want to make sure that those dogs are healthy. They measure the waistline of the dogs, make sure they're not overweight. They'll check vet records. You are required to keep everything up to date. I mean, just like your pets and everything. So I have had dogs removed from households. Now, I have not done it. They have removed dogs from households because of that reason. So it's a lot of work. I mean, if you think about your pet, it's like double, because you have to, this is a tool and a pet. I mean, there's wonderful things about it, but.
Yeah. And then, that's important, the home environment. They want to make sure that, the dog guide is going into a nice, safe home. So they really look at that as well. They come out, interview, you as the person. They look around your home. They just want to make sure that this dog guide is in the safest environment. A lot of times they restrict how many other dogs you can have in the home. I know some schools, you can't have more than one other, pet or whatever. And then also your travel environment. They look at places that you're going out traveling with the guide dog. Is it safe? Because that's the worst thing is, a dog guide getting attacked by another vicious, dog in the neighborhood. They look at all of that, where you're traveling, because again, that has happened, to some guide dogs that I know that were attacked, from a vicious dog in the neighborhood. They were just out walking, and I know some things you can't control, but they do look at, your home environment and the environment that you will be potentially traveling in. And then your history. I know as it relates to your history, a lot of schools, like if you have committed a felony or something like that, that disqualifies you from applying for a dog guide. So does that answer your question, Gloria? Those are some of the qualifications that most of the schools are probably going to look at most of these. And then some schools may have some additional things that they look at when they're considering if that person, would qualify.
Yeah, thank you.
And again, a lot of times as a mobility specialist, we would go over, this checklist with the client to say, okay, these are some of the things they're going to be looking for, and if you're starting to check things off your list, then it's not looking good.
Okay, thank you, Latricia.
Yeah, I mean, but, again, it just depends on the client. Some people are just, they travel frequently. They're out and about. They're on city buses. They're going to work. And so they're really putting the dog guide to use, and that's what the school likes to see. And so, again, as a part of the process with them, they actually send over what they call an O&M report to the O&M specialist that we have to fill out on that client that's, thinking about, being a guide dog user. And we have to go through the checklist of questions that they're asking us. Can this client do this? Can they do that? And we have to give our honest opinion of what we saw, that client do during training. And so basically once that completed, we have no control over whether that person would get approved or not to proceed through training. So we always like to let the client know that as well. We're just giving, our opinion as it relates to how you did things during training, but we have no say over whether you are approved, to proceed with training. Some clients kind of get that mixed up.
I did have an interesting conversation with a dog guide trainer one time, and I want to share it because I think it was a little bit eye-opening. I was describing, how sometimes it's hard to tell clients that, they're not a good fit. And, we can work on skills all day long, but when you have other issues going on, it makes it very difficult. Or I was saying, this person just doesn't have any goals. They don't go out into the community. Well, that dog guide trainer said, would they go into the community more if they had a dog guide? So it's important to kind of think about it all as an O&M instructor when we are making these decisions on the O&M assessment. So we do. It's a very thorough assessment. And I would say that well, I know that I'm very honest on them because I want to make sure that dog is going to someone that will definitely benefit from it. So.
And that right, as Maddie mentioned, the question is, if this person received this guide dog, would this, improve their mobility? Do you think they would get out more with it? And, you can kind of tell, by working with the person how motivated they are, whether they would, get out more or if they would probably continue to do some of the same things, that they're doing now. So we have to really be honest about that.
I want to talk about how,
also as an specialist.
want to talk about how different the travel is between the two. I know that a lot of my dog guide users tell me that it's apples and oranges, like you really can't compare the two. And we mentioned previously that the white cane bonks you into stuff because it's supposed to, it's doing its job, but the dog guide moves you around things and kind of takes you more point A to point B. They're both really valid and good ways of traveling. I'm curious, I'd like to open it up if people have any experience with a white cane versus the dog guide or understanding from friends. My understanding is that a lot of times people will approach a dog a little quicker than they do a white cane. So, it's something to take into consideration. Do you want to interact with the public or do you not?
Right. Yeah, I hear that a lot from some of my clients, like with having the dog guide, more people more, I guess they notice them more as opposed to when they use the white cane. Because most people, want to come over and say hi, to the guide dog or maybe pet it, which kind of brings us also into some frequently asked questions like, what should you do if you see a person that's a guide dog user? You know, there are certain things that you can and cannot do, and some people just don't know, you know. And it's also up to what they call the handler, which is the person that's working the guide dog, to also, you know, educate people on the appropriate way to interact, you know, with him or her and their guide dog. So I was going to kind of also go through some frequently asked questions that people may have about, you know, how do you interact? What do you do if you see a person using a guide dog? Again, because everyone, that's the first thing they want to pet it.
I kind of compare it to just walking a dog sometimes. In my neighborhood, I walk my dogs every day. I do not know the names of the humans who are walking dogs, but I always know the dogs' names. So I think dogs are just like a little magnet to other people. We just always want to interact. We always want to pet them. But with dogs, you cannot. You are not allowed to touch, interact, don't make eye contact, nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, just kind of some do's and don'ts if someone is approaching a person in their dog guide. You know, do you pet it? And basically, no, because basically when you see that person, you know, they holding the harness, that's the thing that they're gripping as they move along. That dog guide is considered working at that time. So you cannot distract him or the owner. You know, you can't pet that dog guide. You know, now once the owner or the client, you know, drops the harness and the dog is not considered working, then you could ask that person, is it okay if you pet, you know, their dog guide? But you have to get permission from that person. You just can't go up to that person. And I've seen that happen, you know, more than once while out training with the person that is a dog guide user. It's just, yeah, so the right thing to do is just to ask that person before you touch.
And you should never try to pet a white cane.
Let's see, some other questions that people ask sometimes is, can the dog guide go wherever the person goes? And that answer is yes. It's welcome wherever that person goes, and that is a protection that comes under the American with Disability Act that says anywhere that person goes, that their dog guide is allowed to go with them. And a lot of places now you'll see that they have signs out, you know, whether it's a restaurant or hotel or wherever, it does say that, you know, service dogs are allowed, you know, in our establishment. So they can actually go anywhere their handler goes.
Yeah, and often upon graduation, the students or the graduates are given a little card that just kind of backs them up when they are in public spaces, because believe it or not everybody knows these laws. I hear it particularly in restaurants. Sometimes people are barred from entry. However, it's important to keep in mind that it is a dog. And so you can be barred from places if your dog is unkempt, right? It has to be clean. It has to be groomed. If your dog is, you know, out in the middle of the area and needs to be tucked under chairs and tables. So if it's unruly, there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't be able to take your dog into public spaces, let alone it is a dog, right? I mean, last year alone, I had to take my big dog to the vet at least 8 times. He was sick 8 times. So you can't always take your dog everywhere just because it is still, you know, a animal and they get ill.
So, yeah, so that's a good point, Maddie. So in that case, you know, it's nice to have your mobility skills. So during times where you may not want to take your dog guide out with you, you can pull out your white cane. You know, there are some situations clients are like, it's too crowded, it's too noisy, I think I'm just going to take my cane or use, you know, human guide, where you're holding on to that person right above the elbow. So, you know, some people do choose to leave their dog guide at home sometimes, just depending on, you know, the area and where they're going to be traveling.
Another question that sometimes people ask is, do the dog guide ever get a chance to play? And they do, you know. Once the client is home, a lot of times they will take them off of the harness and they just let them run around. And at that point, they are just considered a regular dog, and they can play, jump, or whatever. So they do get a chance, you know, to play, because some people are worried about that.
I think dog guides have to be the happiest dogs I've ever seen, I've ever interacted with. I've worked with this client who had a German Shepherd, and that dog was the happiest dog, working and off harness, because it was like crazy time every time I got there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
And that kind of also, just one last little tidbit. There are a lot of different types of dogs that are used for dog guides. I think some people do have allergies. You know, commonly you see the kind of the lab retriever mix. Pam will get to you in a second. And I have worked with poodles. I have worked with German Shepherds, or clients with poodles and clients with German Shepherds. So specific schools will use specific types of dogs. I have heard of privately trained guide dogs. You know, I don't think for your first dog, probably your second dog, that's a good idea. But I have seen a husky as a dog guide, which personally, I don't think that's a good choice for Florida, but you know, personal choice.
Yeah.
Pam, did you want to say something? I'll unmute you. Don't try, please. I will do it. Boop.
Okay. You may have just answered my question. I was wondering, are all guide dogs larger dogs, or can, not even as, I know standard poodles are big, but do they ever have a smaller dog or a medium-sized dog?
Primarily, you're going to get kind of that female lab size and larger. I would never want a Chihuahua dog guide. That thing would just... You have to have something with enough force to be able to pull to give you that information. So a lot of information from a dog guide comes from the actual harness. So, you know, movement, you can tell when they've stopped or halted. You can tell when they've turned their body. So, yeah, you wouldn't want a teeny tiny thing. No, you would definitely need a medium-sized dog and above. I did hear of this when I did a training in New York. There were some Canadians there, and there is a school in Canada that uses Bernese mountain dogs.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my, that'd be great.
With the guide dog school, they definitely try to match, you know, the dog guide with the person. You know, whether, you know, you're really tall or you're a really short person, or you have you walk slow or you're a fast walker. They really try to match you with the dog guide that's gonna, you know, you're gonna be on the same pace together, because you are working as a team.
Okay,
So,
thank you. You can.
I've seen they have been matched, you know, really well.
Okay.
In all my years of teaching, I mean, I think I've known of one client that had to, you know, return their guide dog because it was just walking too fast for her pace.
Okay.
Yeah, and
All
so
right,
she had to be rematched.
That answered my question. You can mute me again. I think Patty had a question.
Patty, I will unmute you. I know which one you are. Okay, what do you want to add?
Well, I was in a restaurant one time, and this lady had a Chihuahua with a marker on her that said she was I can't remember what it said. It said it was a guide dog, if I remember right. And I thought, a Chihuahua being a guide dog? I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it because I think that she could have gone out and bought that just to be able to get into the restaurant and take her dog with her. And am I wrong about that? Something that small being some kind of an assist dog of some sort?
No, some people do not. Some people do use animals or dogs for like emotional support.
Okay.
So it could have been for that.
Okay.
Technically,
just-
there are
Excuse me. It's just the only one I had ever seen like that, and I had wondered if she had gone out and bought the tag, you know, the harness for it for some other reason. You know, it just didn't make sense.
there are a lot of people who might go out and purchase a placard for their animal because it does allow you a certain amount of freedom in public spaces. If we are following the rules of these different tiers, I'll call them, of therapeutic animals. So you have your working dogs, right? You have your therapy animals that go into public spaces like hospitals, you know, nursing homes, whatever. And then you have your emotional support animals that only help one person. There are different tiers of allowed areas. However, you can't ask those questions. You kind of just have to rely on the person not to abuse the system.
Right.
One thing to keep in mind is that one of the troubles dog guides have is that they are working, right? They are official. They have harnesses. The owner or the user has a little card that identifies them as a dog guide user. Well, they go into that same restaurant as the lady with the Chihuahua. And if that Chihuahua really isn't trained and attacks that dog, that person can get in a lot of trouble for interfering with a working animal. So, you know, it's just one of those things like, do you want to deal with that with the dog guide? You know, it's hard to, it's just another thing to weigh in public spaces, I think.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
I think we've kind of covered everything, Maddie, as it relates to using the cane.
Can I throw in 2 cents?
Hi, Kathy, go ahead.
Hey, we had a speaker from Southeastern Guide Dogs at our park, and they said to train a guide dog from birth to giving it out to a handler is about $50,000 to $60,000.
Yeah.
And that's why a good school will keep track of their dogs and make sure they're well taken care of, because that's a huge investment.
Yes.
And they last about 10 years, I think.
Yes.
You know, that they're, was it 8 to 10 years, you think?
10 years.
Yeah. So it's interesting. But I know if you don't use it enough, you know, you're not doing yourself or the dog a favor.
Yes.
They have to be worked. They love to work.
So again, that goes back to, as the specialist, when we're filling out these reports, we have to be really honest about that person that's applying for that dog guide, because, you know, we want to make sure that it's going to get used or worked to the best of its ability. And trust me, they're ready to work. They love to work. So yes, we want to make sure they're, you know, they're being paired with clients that are going to really, you know, use them. Yep.
Yeah, you're right. Because when you get the harness out for a guide dog, their whole body language changes. You know, they're just like at attention and ready to go.
Yep, they're ready.
It's kind of fun
and,
to see.
you know, and for some people, you know, a guide dog is not for every person, you know. So again, you have to go through that list of qualifications and see where do you fall on that list.
A lot of the scheduling that you have to do with the dog, you know, interferes, because you've got to feed them at a certain time and brush them every day, walk them at a certain time, and, you know, more than a pet.
It's a job.
Yeah, they like their schedules.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility. I always tell clients, and you know, a lot of times when I start talking about some of the responsibilities, they're like, "Oh man, no, that's too much."
But that being said, I do think there are a lot of positives, and for the right person, it is a good tool.
Yeah.
I think we try to be as honest as we can with people. And if people are willing to put in time on the back end and work on skills and get stronger,
Yes,
you know, what we say is not,
the final.
yeah, it's not final by any means, the O&M
Yes, and-
instructors,
yep.
but it's,
And I've seen some beautiful working relationships between the handler and the dog guide. I mean, the handler is on it. They're correcting when they should. You know, they're not letting things go, and that's what you have to. You have to be really firm. You know, I've seen some beautiful relationships working together.
I had this really cute duo, and the client always said that her dog was very sensitive. You couldn't, if you needed to make a correction, a lot of times it's it's like a pull on a chain on the throat, and that's a physical correction. And then there's also a verbal one. And the dog just didn't respond to the physical corrections because she was so sensitive. And I didn't believe her, but definitely a sensitive dog. So it's just funny how the handler and the dog create that rapport and that relationship.
And I've seen
Take a while, but
and I've seen some handlers that were not so great at doing the corrections. You know, they would let a lot of things go, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. You know, so.
and that's how they
It's a lot of
become
work.
pets.
Yes.
One other thing about a dog, having a dog in Florida that I think is funny with dog guides is you often see them get real fat in the summertime. I call it Florida fat because all the dog guides, they don't go out and travel as much because the
Right.
humans don't go out and walk as much.
Yeah, because of the heat. Yes.
Might be a good time to open this up to questions. If you have a question and you want to add to the conversation here, if you're on a phone, you can press *6. On the phone, you can press *6. If you are, have any comments, this is a good time to make them, share them with the group. I don't know if we have any dog handlers on the line, but we'd love to hear from you if you want to participate in this conversation. I know it's a little after 2. We took a long time, Latricia. We had a lot to say.
Yeah, this was good though.
I think people are always curious about getting a dog. So, I actually think there could be even further conversation. That's the problem, is this is only an hour, so.
Yeah.
Let's hit it.
There it is.
Hello?
Hi, Dave.
Yeah. How many miles a day do you walk a dog?
I would think.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Dave, we can hear you. I was expecting Latricia to answer. But I would think that every dog is different. I know that in the qualifications to get a dog, it says something like you have to be able to walk a specific distance independently without breaks.
Yeah. So I think it was a couple of blocks, it said.
What'd you say?
Had to walk a certain.
Is there certain miles you walk a dog every day, or?
Yes, you need to. It needs to be worked every day.
Now, I take a walk in the morning, and usually I try and get a short one in at night.
Yes.
If I gotta catch it before the sun goes down, though, because I can't always see at night.
Mhm.
But I take a short walk at night. I
Yeah.
can. I've tried to take a long one, and I got caught at night,
Mhm.
and then I couldn't see the harder you get back.
Mhm. Okay. So that, if you were a dog guide user, then that would be something your dog guide could help you, work your route back home, during those times, that if you get caught out and you can't see. That'll be one of the responsibilities of your dog guide. And basically, they, as the school, they want to be sure that you can at least walk a couple of blocks, but the more you work your dog guide, the better. And, just like anything, if you're going places, it needs to go with you. It's your eyes. So, so not necessarily where you're having to get up and walk around the block, 2-3 times. If you're going out in stores, you're going, wherever you would go, that's working your dog guide. And that is also counting as, miles that you're getting in with it.
When you are working a dog guide, it is more than just going for an evening stroll though, right? Like you want to make sure that your travel is goal oriented, like the grocery store, like, for example, like in a community, if you're trying to get to the
pool
like the pool, the workout place or something like that, like having an actual end point.
Right.
But I think we answered that. There's no sort of min or maximum amount of travel in a day for a dog. Schools might have specific suggestions, and that's why it's important to research schools too ahead of time. If you are somebody who is interested in orientation and mobility, and then maybe moving on and getting a dog guide, it's a good time to connect with us. We are, of course, it's complicated right now providing mobility training, but we are trying to do some teleconferencing like this over the phone as best we can as well. But the sort of the steps involved is to contact your case manager at the Lighthouse, make sure that you are signed up for mobility training. That might require an over the phone agreement to your to adjusting the things that you're interested in learning in, and then it requires an assessment through mobility specialist and talking through what your goals might be, whether it is a dog guide at the end of everything or whether you just want to get mail from your mailbox. Then we move through those steps. So like I just described, you're gonna start with those baby steps, getting around safely in your home, getting around safely in your neighborhood, and then sort of branching out from there. And that's probably about where Latricia and I would be able to gauge whether you will be a good candidate or not.
Yes.
A lot of times we will see aging populations. There isn't an age limit or ceiling, I guess is the right word. So,
you just have to be at least 18.
But there's no top age, right?
No.
So, that's not really a concern. The concern is that you can get around safely, independently first. So you do have to do the mobility training first, but hopefully if you are motivated, you will work independently between sessions and get through all of that, as quickly as possible. But if you have further questions, you can talk to your case manager about services for mobility training, or you can stay on the line here. I'm probably just going to stay on until there's no one left, so I'm happy to answer questions. Well, thank you for being here. Latricia, this was fun.
Yeah, good session.
So if you weren't here at the very beginning, I mentioned that tomorrow we are doing our stress and coping skills along with laughter therapy. Laughter therapy is starting tomorrow. I'm sorry, I'm trying to avoid the dog in the background. And that's going to be at 1 p.m. immediately followed at 2:15 by our support group. So if you start at 1, you can just trail into our 2:15 support group. All of the 1 o'clock sessions are recorded, but that 2:15 support group will not be recorded because that's meant to be a time for us to spend, share, rant, whatever we need to do.
Right.
So hope we see you tomorrow. Thank you for supporting us today. Anytime you spend with us is actually supporting us. So we will talk to you soon. Talk to your instructors if you have any ideas or suggestions or things you want to hear about.